And if everyone can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence afterwards.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
And if everyone can stand for the
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Matthey,
Here.
Councilmember Bolin,
Here.
Councilmember Motney,
Here.
Councilmember Emig,
Here.
Councilmember Becker,
Here.
Councilmember Carrillo, Councilmember Ward,
Here.
Councilmember Craybill,
Here.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Here.
Thank you.
And I'm here. Thank you. We do not have any recognitions or appointments. And so the next item on the agenda is public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody for public comment?
We do. We have 10 individuals registered for public comment. We can start with Thomas Larry.
Okay. Before you start, let me read my statement. Public comment is an opportunity for speakers to provide their views and feedback to the city council. It is also an opportunity for the city council to listen and hear diverse points of view. To maximize the impact of public comment and show respect for the expression of all views, speakers should maintain civility and focus on city issues. Speakers must identify themselves for the record, but are not required to give their address. Each speaker is given the floor for 3 minutes, and the council does not respond or engage in debate. Any speaker that engages in threatening or disorderly behavior will be deemed out of order and their time ceased. So if we could go ahead and proceed to the first speaker.
We have Thomas Larry. We can go ahead and do Gary Donahue.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to add comment to the meeting. I've been coming to these council meetings since July the 12th. I recognize some of your faces, so allow me to ask this simple rhetorical question. By a show of hands, in the past 24 hours, have any of you run the dishwasher, ran a load of laundry, took a bath or shower, or flushed a toilet? You just please hold that thought for a second. A lot of talk has transpired in a lot of technical engineering and legal language in the past several weeks. And it pretty much is all dancing around the fact that the city has a sewage system that includes 82 miles of combined sewers in which rainfall deluges are combined with poop. A couple of weeks ago, Scott Miller live on WJBC brought this up to City Manager Tim Gleason. And live in public, he dodged the question and refused to discuss why citizens are getting poop in their homes because of these combined sewers. Anyone can listen to it. It's in the public domain. So far, almost every pathway to granting any insurance claim from our private carriers or from the city of Bloomington, Illinois, has been declined because they are all hanging their decisions on the catchphrase coined by Tim Gleason: act of God, 100-year rainstorm, but no mention of the P word. Some call this meeting the storm agenda. This discussion needs to move forward to answering the question about the P word that Tim Gleason hasn't addressed. We need to ask council another question. Even though none of you were here in 2014, in your current role representing today's citizens, isn't it okay for you to vote now in 2021 to at least reimburse citizens today for failures by your predecessors to keep the P word from backing up into people's homes? Along with the P word, residents of Eastgate experienced another high dollar word: anxiety. So in the past 24 hours, we had another front of thunderstorms pass through this area and the Peoria area. And I'm wondering if any of you on council got a good night's sleep. Most of us in Eastgate didn't sleep well because of fear that one of the two storm fronts, what they could do. Meanwhile, a lot of us also didn't run the dishwasher, run a laundry, take a bath or shower, or flush the toilet until after the rainstorms passed. Because you see, we weren't afraid of the storm. We were afraid of the P word. Please help us.
Thank you, Gary. Next.
Next, we have Coretta Jackson.
Good evening. My name is Coretta Jackson. I am a resident of Ward 7, so I'm not in the Eastgate neighborhood. I am in the section of Bloomington that got hit the hardest. I'm not going to tell you a story. What I'm going to do is give you a few numbers, which most of you on council may know these figures, but the public does not. So I'm going to run these numbers off to you because numbers stick in people's heads, and I want this to be something that you all go home and think about seriously. The first number is 19. That's the number of years I've been a resident in Bloomington. That's also the number of years that I have noticed that classism reigns supreme in Bloomington, particularly in the Public Works Department. I do personally know individuals that have worked for that department and currently do. And the running theme is, oh, you guys live on the west side, you know you got to wait your turn. That's a fact. And it was proven with this flood. 3.5, that is the number of feet of sewage water that I had in my basement, not once, but twice. 1.625. That is the percentage of interest rate that we were offered from the SBA for our loans. It may seem like a low rate to most, but to those who can't afford loans like myself, we all know I have NAMVIA on my back. I have an auto loan, and at 41, I cannot stand to take on another loan. 4, that is the number of Eagle Creek residents that I spoke with that would have gladly given up their spot in the bulk pickup so that we on West Monroe could have had our trash picked up. Because the next number I'm going to give you is 21. That is the number of days that we had feces soaked trash stacked 4+ feet high on our streets, not on the curb. That's where it started. It wound up in the streets. My neighbors and I were dodging trash just to get to work in the morning. Now, the numbers that I'm about to give you are bigger ones, and I'm sure you guys know about. The first one is $3,160,394. You guys know what that is. That is the number of dollars that the city of Bloomington received from the CARES Act. I think that amount probably offset the loss of tax revenue from businesses being closed during COVID. $6,693,462 that the city received on the 19th of May from the American Rescue Plan Act. $26.5 million in the reserve fund. 3.1 of those you all are voting on to spend tonight, which would save the city, what, $200,000 in finance charges. The biggest number of all is 0. That is the number of responses we received from our mayor on West Monroe, the number of visits we received from him to assess the situation. The number 0 equals the number of pictures that I own because they were in my basement. I have no pictures. I have a 24-year-old. The only pictures that I have pregnant with her are gone. I hope those numbers stick in you guys' heads and you guys think about that.
Thank you, Coretta. Next speaker.
Next, we have Mark Welch.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Welch. I live on West Monroe Street. I've been there since May of 1979. We have never had flooding since May of 1979. It's a nice street, nice neighborhood. It's mixed. Most people on that street are homeowners. They take care of their stuff. I'm used to being treated in a second-class manner in that snow removal. We used to be the last to get our snow removed. That has gotten much better. When we got the trash on the 24th and the 25th, the flooding, I go back to to say that we never got flooding before. We got flooded Friday night. We got flooded Saturday night. And I know we've had 500-year rains, quote unquote, since I've been there. This is the first time we got flood. It was sewage. The flooding was on the 24th and 25th. You're supposed to pick up bulk on the odd weekends that you don't do recycle. You've not been on that schedule. Everyone over there knows you come and pick it up whenever you come and pick it up. When we had this problem, we were told, follow the website. We got your schedule, we'll be there. If you were there when scheduled, then you would have picked up bulk on Friday, July the 1st. They didn't. As the lady said, it was 21 days that we had that. We were chasing kids out of it because they were picking through it. That's terrible. I have to check my furnace. Someone just reminded me of that. And one more thing, as this gentleman said, we'd never had this problem before. Now I got hit twice. My whole basement, family room, bedroom, all of that's just completely destroyed. Carpeting, I had people come over and help me get stuff up off the floor, but a lot of things got destroyed. No one has been there to check out anything. No one's been there to investigate anything. All we were told was, you're on your own, we can't help you. God did this. I'm not gonna blaspheme, but God gave us some rain yesterday. Everyone I spoke to on West Monroe Street was monitoring their basement yesterday and this morning. Don't put that on God. You need to fix the problem and you need to help us out. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next, we have Gary Lambert.
Good evening. I'd like to reflect a couple of minutes on the taxing times of Terry Renner. The only one that served throughout that time was Boca. Certainly Donna paid close attention to the numbers. He was elected in April. By August, he had implemented the 4% tax on gasoline. He then set about increasing all the existing taxes. When he ran out of those, we added new taxes. A while later, he hand-selected a group to find a way to cut the budget. They came back with a 0.5% sales tax increase. That was followed shortly after with another 4-cent gasoline tax increase. And then he had a better idea. We'll just add an automatic inflation rate of 3% to all of our utility taxes. The last time we had 3% inflation was 2011. Our budget just went up over 9% this past year. Government increased substantially throughout his reign. Anytime something comes up for a quote, quote, quality of life project, whether it's BCPA or Creativity Center or purchasing lots or snack bars for the zoo or not replacing a pool, but putting in a water park. Bottom line, the cash balances of the city, in spite of the best efforts of the council to spend them, they have not been able to spend the money as fast as it's coming in. There are two things that are true quality of life. You've heard a lot of people talk about them. Fix the sewers, fix the roads, or give the money back to the citizens. And I didn't mention the Coliseum, the quote, enterprise fund that doesn't have to abide by the rules of all the others. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Next.
Next, we have Kathy Petty.
Hello, Kathy Petty from Eastgate Subdivision. I woke up this morning to an image on the internet of a sewer backup in Bloomington last night. This is not my problem. This is not their problem. This problem affects the whole city of Bloomington, all of us. I understand there is a plan in place to separate the storm and sanitary sewers by the year 2030. However, sometimes plans change. Sometimes plans must change. This is one of those times. Please help the city as a whole and get the sewers fixed now. You, the council, have the opportunity to make decisions that will help this project get finished sooner. I believe I heard the city finance person that spoke a few weeks ago suggest that a financial planner be hired to find the best way to use the $13+ million the city was given through the COVID relief fund. The citizens of Bloomington have elected you, the council, to make this decision. Please make this decision without spending extra dollars for someone to make it for you. You were elected by citizens that trust your decisions. Please use at least some of these funds to speed up the sewer separation process. I have a neighbor that would like to take the rest of my time quickly.
I'm sorry, we don't allow that.
Okay,
Did she
that's
sign
fine.
up?
I will do it then. We have one petition here. Two separate people circulated them in our neighborhood that I would like to present to my alderman, Mr. Craybill, asking him to consider our issues and why we want to have the sewer separated. May I do that?
Sure. Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Next.
Next, we have Robert Schultz.
Hello. I live in the Eastgate subdivision. I live in this house up in the northeast corner. And when you look at this, you can see all these green pipes. And I have questions for the city engineer, but I can't ask them. So some of you, I hope, will ask them. One, I did not get water this time. I've had water before. I could go into why I didn't get water this time, but it'd be too long and I have other things I have to talk about. Questions. People look at these green lines and they think, okay, I'm safe. But these green lines connect to purple lines. And if these green lines connect to purple lines, then you can get that purple stuff in your green line, unless the city's got check valves between the green lines and the purple lines. At least that's how my mind works. And I'd like the city engineer to address that. So potentially it seems that everybody could get sewage backed up. And another point, if you had water come into your house through a drain, it was not clean water that came off your roof. There's only one way that sewage can get into your house from somewhere else. It's through the line that you own on your property that connects to the city line. And if your line breaks, the city's not going to pay for it. If their line breaks, they might not do anything about it, right? And so this is a problem for homeowners. Another thing I want to show you on this map, in this horseshoe right here, there's a purple line. And many of my neighbors got water there. And if you look at it, the lines all go to the backyards. if the city does do something there, I haven't heard anybody talk about anything except, well, the lines will go out in the street. If you do that, if the engineer recommends that, who's going to pay the homeowners to put in a new freshwater line from that street and a new sewer line that taps into the street when their existing lines are in the back? If you do the right thing and provide these people with relief, you're going to need to put it here, or somebody's going to have to work out a deal with them on where to connect the freshwater lines and the sewer lines. 30 seconds left. Another question for the engineer: when the city comes out and they roto-rooter the city lines, when I've had them come out, they go through a manhole cover. But why, if the manhole covers are on green lines, are they putting a roto-rooter machine in there to clean them out if they're separated from the sewage, right? It doesn't make sense to me. Lastly, you guys have, in the past, they've kicked it down the road, that can. You're now in their position, and you need to ask yourself if you want to keep kicking the can or you want to do something.
Thank you. Next.
Next, we have Mary Cramp.
Hi there. I have my glasses on, but they fog with the mask. But I went around with the petition in Eastgate with Kathy and another neighbor, and I'd like to read this petition to you. It is to Alderman Jeff Craybill, but we'd also like to circulate this in our nearby areas that are included in the Locust Colton Combined Sewer Overflow area. And we are asking that the city accelerate the Locust Colton plan using American Rescue Plan money. I think it's approximately $13 million. And this project meets the criteria of ARPA funding. It shows progress toward the EPA requirement of separating combined sewers. Funding it now will reduce the cost in the long term due to the time value of money. The use of ARPA funds for this project can wipe out a major portion of the city's infrastructure backlog using the windfall of federal recovery aid. Other benefits to the entire city include laying the groundwork for economic development, preventing decline in property values that reduce the tax base overall, mitigating city liability for property damage and the health of residents due to sewage overflows, and the use of ARPA funding to singularly address this issue rather than for multiple projects, which will simplify and lower the cost of administrative reporting requirements to the federal government. We have 87 signatures and we're still continuing to circulate this. So I had one renter who turned us down, but people are really concerned about this and we want you to take us seriously. And I thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Who's next?
Next, we have Judy Davenport.
Hello. I'm Eastgate. I'm going to start off with the teacher good news. Thank you for listening. I've enjoyed seeing City Council work. It's been interesting, and I appreciate your guys questioning things. I'd like to express gratitude first for the meeting that was held at Bloomington Junior High School. I don't know who organized it, but this teacher's given gold stars to both the producer and the organizer of that meeting. It made a difference in my life. I got help with respite care for a disabled relative. I got help for replacement of freezer. I also got, bless their soul, the American Baptist Men Disaster Relief Organization. They came and took out my sheetrock, took the heavy things from the basement I couldn't get out. They also cleaned and steamed it. And as you can imagine, They were free. My question comes, now what? Can I invest any money in my basement, putting it back? That's going to depend on how you guys do, because my husband says, why put money down there if the problem's not fixed? We've done many things in our home to repair things, to guard against this, sump pump, dry well, wet drainage around. But I also have to say that I've been blessed. My insurance did pay for some of it. Not yours, but mine. But I'm at the point where it's paid for some of my cash outlay, and now I have to make that decision as to what's going to affect whether I can sell my house, whether I can finish my basement. What do I do now? I hope that you will take the opportunity to find ways to finance this in an accelerated fashion to help not just Eastgate, but the whole city's got this problem. And after hearing one of the other speakers, I'm grateful. I guess I came out more blessed than she did. And I've seen pictures of basement walls that have fallen in. It's very alarming in a city in 2021 that we still haven't fixed this problem. Please expedite your timeline.
Thank you.
We have
Anybody
one
else?
more, and
One
it's
more?
Winnie Gent.
Good evening. My name is Winnie Gent. My husband died of cancer last year, and I had to sell my home in Carlock and relocate. I considered myself lucky to find a cute little brick house in the Eastgate subdivision. And then the flood hit. I saved the washer and the dryer and the hot water heater. I lost all my husband's personal effects. The new furnace and air conditioner cost me $8,744.15. I had no special flood insurance and was told that the city's antiquated water sewer system might be reconsidered in 2029. They tell me the real estate market is hot. Would any of you be interested in buying a cute little brick home in Eastgate? Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. So do we have any comments, written comments that was sent in?
We received one emailed public comment that was forwarded to council from Angie Thomas.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that any other council members would like to have removed? Okay, Councilmember Cribble.
7D is in David.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, if no one else wants to remove anything, so is there a motion to approve the,
I will make the motion to approve all items with the exception of what Jeff Crable pulled.
7D? Okay. Is there a second?
I'll
Okay.
second.
Okay, that's, sorry, I saw Councilmember Becker first. Okay, Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Matthey,
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin, Councilmember Motney,
Yes.
Councilmember Emig,
Yes.
Councilmember Becker,
Yes.
Councilmember Ward,
Aye.
Councilmember Craybill,
Yes.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes. Okay, the item passes, no nays to announce. Next item on the agenda is item 7D, Councilmember Cribble.
Thank you, Mayor. Exchanged some emails today with Scott, our finance director, with regard to this. And so basically, as I understand it, we're going to pay $3 million this year out of our reserve fund to save maybe a little over 200,000 over the life of what the lease would have been. And I guess my question is, with some of the things that we're hearing from our constituents with regard to the storms, other things as to what we're going to do with past due amounts owed to the city, how by paying this amount, is that going to hamper us in doing some of those other things if we choose as a council to do those?
Okay, sounds good. Looks like City Manager Gleason, would you like to?
There we go. I think the simple answer to your question, Alderman Crable, is it would depend on the capacity, the amount of any future conversations. You know, if $3.1 million is going to make a difference on what council might be considering in the future. This initiative, I'll call it, is something that's been a priority and direction of council to move in this direction. Finance Director Scott Rathbun presented this in preparation for this being an agenda item tonight at the last council meeting. But I think the simple answer to your question is it would depend on the size and scope of what council may consider if this $3.1 million would make that kind of difference.
Does that satisfy your question, or do you have anything else to add, Councilmember Crable, before I move on to others?
No, I know.
Okay, sure. I think I saw Councilmember Bolin first.
I'd like to make a motion to approve as presented.
Okay.
I would
Is there-
second that.
One second. Okay. Well, I guess we can vote on the motion. Council,
Conversation first.
sure. Well, I guess, sure. Okay, yep, that's right. Go ahead. Councilmember Ward.
It's okay. Can someone, and perhaps City Manager Gleason, you could speak to this. I'm wondering, can you confirm?
Can you speak closer to the mic?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you confirm the amount that we've been talking about with regard to how much, I'm not saying damages, but damage has been done, the cost of the storm to residences and businesses? I'm hearing the numbers anywhere from $4 to $5 million being tossed around. Is that an accurate range?
Those are numbers that I've heard as well, but they've come through council members. I've not heard that from anybody in the community.
Okay. And would it be possible, if this were approved, would it be possible to, or what would it take anyway? I know anything's possible. What would it take to set aside the $200,000 immediately to provide assistance to people within the community? And is that a council member initiative? Is it an amendment to this? In what context could that happen?
As far as $200,000 that we would realize as a savings through this, through this consent item. If it becomes in this larger discussion, and I know that we have a continuation of trying to present the facts of our system of the storm event tonight, the much larger conversations going to occur as promised next Monday. You know, if council makes the decision to reprioritize infrastructure, I do feel, and we have been working behind the scenes, that we have the capacity to take that on. Just want to make sure that council understands what can be done in terms of infrastructure process and what can be done in terms of the cost for the projects. And I'm not sure that's an exact answer, but $200,000, we have the capacity to adjust that or find that somewhere in the budget if that becomes the council's wishes.
So one other question and then a comment. If this were tabled for this week. Sorry, I just pressed it down. If we tabled this and then came back to this item at a future date, would there be a substantive cost to us hold off on making a decision on this?
No.
Okay, then the comment, and then I'll let others. My suggestion is, I'm not supporting moving forward with this right now. We've been hearing for weeks and weeks at this point, well over a month, that we will get more answers, in August. And I would like to see what those answers are before we go spending millions of dollars from our reserves and committing ourselves to something like this. I'd like to see us wait, have everything out on the table, and then make a decision based on having all those facts in front of us. If we can wait weeks and weeks and weeks to get answers on the flood, then let us wait at least another couple weeks, if not into September, to make a decision on this.
Okay, Councilmember Matthew.
So I would say I'm fine. If we want to table that, I have no problem with that. I just wanted to provide some clarity because I am the one who has been pushing for us to stop financing capital equipment purchases. So just so everybody who's watching understands what we're talking about, is every year the city has to purchase some basic equipment as part of a rotation in order to function and operate. So some years that might be a new fire truck, some years it could be an ambulance, some years it could be a squad car or a new backhoe for public works or things of that nature. And since the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, when we did not have the money to pay for those, we've been financing those. And so every year there's a new financing that goes forward. And some years it's more than others, but every year we finance, there is interest associated with that financing that goes forward. So I've been pushing for us to stop financing things because one year it might be 200,000 that we have potential savings if we don't finance. Another year it might be 150,000. It could be 300,000. That amount of money and savings that we have could keep fluctuating depending on what interest rates are. You know, because we don't always have fixed interest rates. A lot of them are variable interest rates, and the economy does what the economy is going to do. So I'm fine if we push this one off, but we do have to get out of the habit of financing these equipments, and we should be paying for things as we go. So that's why I would support this. However, if Donna made the original motion, if she wants to withdraw that and just table it until 2 weeks time certain or something like that, I would follow that as a seconder as well.
Well, it looks like, Donna, you had a question. Did you want
Pardon
to,
me?
did you want to participate further?
No, I do not want to withdraw the motion, and let me tell you why. It goes back to what Jamie was saying. People, here's where the institutional knowledge is very important. Back during the recession, half the staff had to be let go. That's how bad our finances were. And thank you to our current finance department. We have built our finances to a place where we can afford to pay cash for our required equipment. And we have IT stuff on credit. We have fleet on credit. We have all sorts of stuff on credit. And the best way to have solid financial footing is to get out of debt. And that's, I support this 100%. So if people want to vote it down, that's fine. But I support what Scott Rathman brought forward. There is still money left in the reserves over and above what is required or the policy states. So I say we move forward.
You okay with that? Ms.? Okay, all right. Does anybody else want to? Tom? Oh. Oh, okay. Councilmember Emig?
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation about this. I don't think it's mutually exclusive to table. I think it's important to understand the principle of wanting to reduce our debt by purchasing equipment. However, given City Manager Gleason's response to the first question, which is it depends on the size and scope of what you want to do as council, and we'll have more information to make that decision this evening. So I think it doesn't mean that we don't value that approach. It means that we're willing to table a decision about spending that money right now in this way until we have better and more information. So I would support tabling it for now.
Okay, Councilmember Becker.
So I'm 100% for accelerating and expending more money on the infrastructure in both ways, whether it be roads or sewers. This, I think, is a different issue. I think due to how long it takes to do things, there is plenty of money to take care of being good and sound, fiscally responsible decision right now and let this go through as is. It will not, in my opinion, in any way affect our ability to accelerate things. It's just the emotional side of things, and I really appreciate the conversation and the perspective, is we want to be careful to make sure we have the ability to do the good. The ability is there. Tabling this to me is just putting one more thing down the road and continuing maybe a pattern of delaying when we can make a good, sound decision today. I'd rather make the decision on this and let this go today and focus all our energy on using the remaining time and money that we have on moving forward with those decisions separately.
Okay, I see no other questions Councilmember Montney.
I'd just like to affirm that I agree these two things are not related, and I'm a very strong supporter of investing the relief money that we have coming our way to support our infrastructure improvements. I think that this proposal, which we had previously reviewed and we're on the path to making, is unrelated, and it does not negate our commitment to the infrastructure improvements.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councilmember Ward.
With respect, we haven't made a commitment yet that we've followed through on to infrastructure. That's the problem. We've made commitments, but we haven't followed through on them. And that's why I'm calling for us to hold off on doing something that can't be undone with this. I'm not saying I think it's a great idea to always lease and never to pay cash. I think it's a wonderful thing to pay cash and avoid interest. I try to do it in my own finances. That's a great thing. And I can think of plenty of things to spend the $200,000 on that we would save. But what I am saying is we have not followed through on our commitments in the Locust Colton project, in the combined sewer obligation. And I mean that in a moral, ethical way, not in a who's negligent way. We haven't followed through on our commitments to do right by people. And until we can get all those facts on the table, it seems like it's worth it to wait for a couple of weeks, maybe till September, and then revisit this. I'm not saying never, I'm just saying not now, out of respect for what we've been hearing for weeks now.
Okay, Madam Clerk, could you go ahead and call the roll?
Councilmember Matthey,
Yes.
Yeah, so let me just repeat the motion. The motion is to approve
As
as
presented.
presented.
Councilmember Bolin,
Yes.
Councilmember Motney,
Yes.
Councilmember Emig,
No.
Councilmember Becker,
Yes.
Councilmember Ward,
Nay.
Councilmember Craybill,
No.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes. Okay, I believe the item passes 5-3, right, Madam Clerk?
There's 3 nays to announce.
Yes.
That would be Councilmember Emig, Councilmember Ward, and Councilmember Craybill.
Okay, thank you. So next item on the agenda is a public hearing The public hearing is on a petition submitted by Brandon Gray requesting the vacation of an alley, Lot 8 of McDowell subdivision and Lot 4 of JB Stevenson subdivision, which will vacate an alley between 508 and 514 East Jackson Street as requested by the Public Works Department and the Economic and Community Development Department. So I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. And who do we have? Kevin, go to the presentation. Thank you.
Mayor and council, we have a slide, if I could have that up. This is in your council packet, but this is the location map of the alley in question. It's hatched in red, and it's a T alley. There's an east-west alley, and then this is just the north-south portion that comes into the T. The property on both sides of the alley is with the same owner, and they're just requesting that be vacated. It does not affect the other alley or the other residences. And so Public Works is supportive of it. One question you'll want to consider is whether to waive the compensation amount. Our street and alley vacation policy says that there should be compensation to the city for vacating the alley. And that would have to be part of the motion at a future meeting to consider the vacation, but we'd be interested in your feedback on whether you think compensation is needed there. The petitioner is really not interested if he has to pay for the alley right away. The benefit to the public is that we have one less section of alley to maintain, which we struggle with keeping all the alleys in good shape the way it is. So if you have any questions, more than happy to answer, but we'll continue the public hearing.
Okay, before we have any questions from the council members, is there anybody who would like to speak to members of the public who wants to speak to this? Go on up, Gary.
Just a very brief comment. You've got a policy in place. It calls for the city to be paid for that property. If you waive that, then you should do away with the policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to make a comment? Okay, seeing none. Are there members of the council who'd like to make comments? Councilmember Matthew and then Councilmember Ward.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that Mr. Gray purchased all three of those properties. They were in pretty significant state of deterioration to the point where there was consideration at one point of actually tearing all three buildings down, and has restored all three of the houses in that section with 508, 510, and 514. The neighborhood refers to them as the sherbet houses because they're painted bright, almost sherbet-like colors and stuff. So I guess my question would be, Kevin, is that alley in a good state of repair right now? Or is that alley in need of work like many other alleys in town?
The alley is not in great shape, and obviously he would take care of it from here on out if it was granted to him.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Ward and then Councilmember Craybill.
Is there a reason that he's giving, that he's asking for the city to give this to him for what, 10,000 essentially for free, when it would cost him $10,000? Is there a reason that he's providing that the city should do this?
He just said he wouldn't be interested if he has to buy the property and then invest money to fix up the area as well.
Councilmember Craybill.
So I guess, and it's probably in the packet, but I guess, is there a purpose for him? Like, what does he plan to do with the alley that he can't do now?
Well, he would just maintain it as access to the garages there that he currently has, but he would improve it himself and make it nicer than it is as an alley.
Is he saying at all that people are using that alley that, would not then be able to use it before or use it after? That makes sense.
Yeah, I think the primary access through that alley is really to his properties, to the garages there and so forth. And I think he just wants to have it nicer and fix it up as far as for his purposes, as opposed to, just serving the general public through there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I guess I have a question for you, Kevin. What is the cost of maintaining that alley? Do you know?
Say that again, Mayor.
What's the cost of maintaining that
Oh, the
alley for?
cost of maintaining, I'm sorry. I don't know off the top of my head on that one. But there is a cost. I mean, if we need to go out there and grade it, put more, rock and so forth in there, there's certainly a cost to that. I can't give you that off the top of my head though.
Okay, sounds good. Are there any other questions or? Did you raise your hand, Jeff? Okay. Oh, okay. Councilmember Crumpler.
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin, is there a precedent for waiving, the person purchasing the property from the city, requesting this waiver? Has that been done previously, or is this a first time?
The right-of-way and alley vacation policy is fairly new with the city. There has not been a lot of instances that have come forward since it was adopted. Prior to that, it was fairly common that in a residential application, the alley would just be vacated without receiving compensation to the city, knowing that the receiver of that property would have to maintain it from here on out. So as far as under the new policy, which was implemented a few years ago, and Jeff could advise too if I'm saying anything incorrectly, but we just haven't had a lot come forth. There was one on the northwest side of Bloomington, probably a year ago, thereabouts, where Eastview was expanding a parking lot. And of course, that was a non-for-profit, and that was done without compensation. Obviously, here it benefits two properties that he owns on both sides of it. But yeah, we haven't had a lot of precedents where in a residential area, they have paid compensation to get it back.
Then I guess I'm wondering, is my understanding that if we don't waive this, the cost, he's not interested in maintaining the alley? Is that correct?
Right, because if my understanding is he has to pay for it, he's not interested in paying for it to acquire it. And then it's just on the city to continue to maintain it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Councilmember Montney and then Councilmember Boland.
From reading the packet, it looked like that this was mutually beneficial and desirable by the city because it would offset the maintenance costs. I know in response to the mayor's question, you weren't sure of the amount there, but do you have an estimate generally and how much labor is associated with maintaining an alleyway just in general? And over what horizon would the value actually be returned to the city for its lack of need to devote labor to serving that alleyway as a service item?
Yeah, and we can make some numbers or put some numbers together with some assumptions and so forth. But anybody that lives on an alley in Bloomington just knows that we tend to run behind trying to maintain them in a quality way, I guess, should I say. And the the less we have to maintain, just the better for the city in terms of expense. Obviously, if we want to increase our budgets and manpower, we could do better with that. But we're limited, as we all know, the roads are in great need, and so are the public alleys. So.
Okay. Councilmember Boland and then Councilmember Emick.
Yeah, it's a quick question. When was the policy put in place and why?
Jeff, do you remember what date the policy was?
Well, the policy that, it
yeah.
needs to be paid for if they're
Right,
gonna.
Yeah. I want to say in the last 3 years, but
Yeah, I want to say in the last 3 years as well.
Okay.
And it was put into place simply because I think staff was getting requests from different entities, and the administration at the time decided that they wanted just a policy to govern that, so everybody was treated equally. And the policy does say that the council can waive for governmental reasons, intergovernmental reasons, that kind of thing. We've waived it in the past for the nonprofit. And as Director Cothey was saying, if you want to add an exception for residential use where, you know, maybe there is a benefit to the city, we would just need to add that into the policy as well. And we can certainly do that if that's the desire of the council. And you can take that on a case-by-case basis and determine whether or not there's good value there for the city or not, or whether it's truly a private benefit and somebody should pay for that additional property that they're receiving.
Well, maybe I'm mistaken, but it appears to me that if this is going to be a private driveway and for their use only, that, yeah, it's for their benefit and not really anyone else's. So I personally would think that we should not waive their request, or abide by their request and not waive.
Okay. I'll get back to you in a minute. So Councilmember Emick.
I'm just trying to make sense of the policy that's described in the packet as a response to that we can grant vacation if it's determined to be necessary for the public good, which might be what you were referring to with nonprofit. The right of way must be determined to be of no value to the city, will not have a significant adverse effect, and right of way shall be made on a kind of a case-by-case basis. Park, open space, view, natural area. So it perhaps there could be some more tightening of the policy to include this, but I don't see it as I don't see this creating any problems if we're reducing costs. And I don't, well, maybe you're right, Councilmember Bolin, maybe it is about whether or not it is necessary for the public good. But at the same time, I think that it's flexible enough. The vacation requirements are flexible enough that this particular request could be vacated, especially if it means that we would no longer be maintaining that part of the alley, and the owner claims that he can do a better job. But I'm open to other views.
Thank you, Councilmember Montney.
No, I think for the future, it would be very helpful to know what we're comparing this to, because we have this unknown in terms of the labor cost savings to the city that would be considered in that equation of the benefits as it's compared to the potential value of this property, which I think has been just directionally placed out there. So as we consider situations like this in the future, it would just be very helpful to see that cost benefit laid out. So we would have a comparison as looking out for the cost structure of the city and the benefits to the city, because your labor could exceed this value. At this point, we just don't know.
Okay, Councilmember Matthew.
I was just gonna, we've got kind of a circular argument going right now. We're not gonna fix it. Then he says, well, fine, I'll fix it. Well, you can't fix it because it's ours. Well, then you fix it. Well, we're not gonna fix it now. So we're stuck in a circular loop right now of, if we're not willing to fix it and he is willing to fix it, but he can't fix it because we own it. It's like we're in a spiral pattern here. And it seems like long-term, it's in our benefit to make this as an alley, and a lot of similar alleys like this, if somebody's willing to fix them and abide by city code and property maintenance schedules on their dime instead of ours, I see it as a long-term win.
Councilmember Ward.
Yeah, I feel like I'm operating in the dark here because I don't know how long it's going to cost us, or how long it's going to take us to get to a place where we've reached the $10,000 that we're going to be out with this. And so I can't support a waiver if I can't, if I don't know what the cost is gonna be to us. I used to have a gravel driveway, and every few years we would it's a long driveway, and we would have to, you know, have it graded and have a load of gravel brought in, and that cost us around $500. It's gonna take a long time to work our way to $10,000 on that, and I can think of a few people who could use $10,000 right now to do some stuff. So I would need more information before I could support a waiver.
Okay, Councilmember Becker.
Very, very quick. To me, I have no problem with waiving it, just being candid. But to me, there's one cost that hasn't been mentioned, and that's opportunity cost. I don't want our workers maintaining an alley that someone else would maintain when they can be spending their energy fixing the roads or fixing the sewers. Let the workers go do that. Let the citizen maintain the alley.
Thank you. City Manager Gleason.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Really what we were looking for as staff before this becomes an agenda item in this public hearing was just fact gathering. And some of the questions that have been asked, those would be presented in the memo when this does become an agenda item so that council has the questions answered that they had, or if anything came from the public. So that's what we were looking for tonight.
I don't see any other questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and thank you, Kevin. Move on to the next item on the agenda, regular agenda, which is a presentation and discussion of topics related to city infrastructure and recent storm events as requested by the Public Works Department and the Administration Department. And I wanted to make just a few comments, just to kind of take a moment. I know Kevin is back up to the podium. Just want to take a moment to thank staff for their commitment and professionalism during a very difficult time, working long hours at all levels, responding to issues on the ground, but also answering numerous questions from residents and elected officials alike, even though sometimes, the answers, were not always what people wanted to hear. We all know that it's your job, and that's what you signed up for. But I think you've done it with grace and professionalism, and I believe it is important that we recognize that. I also believe that it's important to recognize that you bring a certain level of expertise many of us do not have, and it's that same expertise that we are going to rely on to help us formulate and execute a plan that moves us forward in a way that is most impactful for the community. So today is the third installment of our discussions. And with the forthcoming next week at the Committee of the Whole, discussion is surely not going to be the last. And as it will kick off a number of conversations about how to budget for all the improvements we want to make to our sewer system. And I think, overall, I can say that there is a strong commitment on the council to make those improvements. The question is just going to be how we're going to do it. And I want to say that we're going to do it all together. It's not going to be easy. I know these budgeting questions and financing are very difficult. I've been part of many of them. It's a question of trade-offs, as you've heard tonight. But I think ultimately we're going to get there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Gleason for some introductory comments as well.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and to the community. This is the third, if you will, installment of our storm discussion. Next week will be the larger discussion at the Committee of the Whole. Actually, that agenda is shaping up where we're going to have a single agenda item, and that's going to be this presentation. And we have taken all four of these presentations or these past meetings to truly try to collect all the data and the facts. I'm responsible to 10 elected officials that are responsible to a community of 80,000. And the decisions that come before them after the fourth presentation, where we really start talking about what are we going to do next. I have got to make sure that they are on the firmest ground with the facts and the data for the decisions that is going to come before them, you know, after that August 16th Committee of the Whole meeting. Tonight, this installment, we're going to share some facts about the storm. But as I have shared in the past and promised, tonight is the conversation about infrastructure process. So there are different steps involved in any given infrastructure process, specifically the sewer projects that we're talking about. And I want the council to understand that these different phases in any given project takes a certain amount of time. So when we talk about possibly advancing or shortening the Locust-Colton project in particular, I want everyone to understand that a 2029 scheduled end date doesn't necessarily mean a 2022 project. But we do have some ability to combine some of those and shorten this project if that becomes the desire of council. There's also a financing component here. The IEPA, which is who we typically get extremely good interest rates from, they only appropriate so much money every single year towards the project. So that's one of the reasons that the project goes out to 2029. It's for the projected funding that we would receive, apply for, and hopefully receive through the IEPA. Now, I will mention, there are a number of things that are going on behind the scenes. You know, when you have a disaster in the state of Illinois, and I know this all too well, to hit that threshold to get federal declaration, a FEMA declaration, you're likely not going to ever hit that threshold and get a public assistance declaration unless somehow the disaster includes Cook County or the city of Chicago. The idea behind that is that in these states that have high populace, like Illinois, is that the states will step in and help the municipalities with some of these smaller disasters. I know my elected officials here have been reaching out to our state elected. I have been reaching out to some of the contacts at the state, and while we are a long way from yes on any of the possibilities that they are considering, we are having those discussions. And it's something that we definitely hear the concerns of the community. One thing that you'll see in this presentation tonight and elaborated on next week is honestly, and you know, this might not be something that you know, some agree with, but the past councils, this current council, there's actually major credit needs to go to them in terms of the infrastructure projects, specifically the sewer. Locust Colton is a successful project, which does not mean that we can't reprioritize and shorten the length of this project. It just might mean that we're using funding outside of the very low interest rate that the IEPA offers. So I just wanted to share that before I turn the floor over to Kevin. I think he's got 25 minutes for this presentation. And I just ask everybody to listen. Maybe go back and look at some of the past council meetings. Definitely tune in to Committee of the Whole on August 16th. And honestly support our council members in terms of what their next decisions are. So with that said, Kevin, you're up.
Thank you, City Manager Gleason, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me again. And tonight our presentation will focus on the aspect of the city infrastructure related to the recent storm events, combined sewers and CSOs. I know that when I was before you a few weeks ago, there were some questions for clarity on combined sewers and combined sewer overflows. So we'll be addressing some of that tonight with some illustrations for you. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just some quick facts. I mean, this really was an extraordinary 2 days for the storm. And, you know, we're talking that areas of Bloomington up to 14 inches in 2 days with an average annual rainfall of 39 inches. That's over a third of our rainfall just in 2 days. I mean, that doesn't happen. Infrastructure, you know, the improvements we've done in the past along Sugar Creek, for instance, with bridges, replacing the Fell Avenue Bridge, the Clinton Bridge, and some others, along with the code required detention on the east side and other areas. And of course, it's code required across the city, but that's something that's been in place since the 80s. And, you know, there are stories of success here, even though, you know, it was a disaster. You know, the Advocate Roman Hospital area and along IW, the athletic area there would have been flooded a lot more if this was in the 70s or early 80s. And so there is a lot of things to be said, and we'll get into that a little bit more next week with some of the things that we've seen with the high water levels and stuff that we observed. So just wanted to let you know that there's a lot more to the storm and the flooding that occurred across the community than just the combined sewers. But tonight we're focused more on the combined sewers. Next slide. How much rain? Well, you know what? 6 inches of rain across the, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll just get closer. 6 inches of rain across the corporate limits, the 27.3 square miles. That generate enough a runoff that night. We could have filled Lake Bloomington from empty. I mean, that's an incredible amount of water. And then when you look at the 2 days with roughly 11 inches of rain, actually, like I said, up to 14, just 11 inches of rain would fill Evergreen Lake, which is a much larger lake than Bloomington. So if you can picture, we had to get rid of that much water that weekend. I mean, that's incredible. And just next slide, please. The size of these lakes. I mean, here's some pictures that kind of give you an illustration. This isn't even the whole lake. I mean, this is just a portion of the lake you're seeing there, but just an incredible amount of water that fell that weekend. So just wanted to share that with you. Next slide. Combined sewers is something that's been talked about a lot. It's not something that's unique to Bloomington. You can see in this map of the United States, there is mostly a focus of them in the Midwest and the Northeast, but they go all the way out to the West Coast. There's over 100 communities in Illinois with combined sewers, and over 9,000 combined sewer outfalls regulated by over 800 permits through the EPA. So not a thing that's unique to Bloomington. So just wanted to share that they are things that have existed in other communities. They are things that are allowed and permitted by the EPA. And so not unique to us. Next slide. This is one you've seen before. This is the overview of Bloomington, and the purple is the combined sewers, and they're generally in the older parts of the community, basically inside the belt buckle of, or inside Veterans Parkway Loop and the interstate. And there's 85 miles of combined sewers. So we have a lot of them still. Next slide, please. Combined sewer overflow. This is from the report for the Locust Colton study. And this is actually a picture of the Locust Street overflow. And what you're seeing there in the background labeled combined sewer, that combined sewer is 66 inches in diameter. So I'm a little bit over 6 foot. I would hit my head in there, but somebody that's 5'6" could stand in there without hitting their head. That's a big pipe coming at us. And then in the foreground is what we call a weir. And that's just a knee wall, if you will. And when you can see that there's wetness in there, there's flow, there's the sewer's flowing at the time the picture's taken. But it's the sanitary flow, the low flow, not during a storm event. And you can see it's not going over the weir, it's going into another pipe at the lower right corner of that image. And that flow goes on to the treatment plant. But then when it rains, what happens is that pipe starts to fill up. When it gets higher than the depth of the weir, then that water, that combined sewage starts to flow over the weir. And you say, well, where does that go? Well, you can see in the foreground there of the picture, there's some leaves there. Years ago, that used to go straight into the country club branch of Sugar Creek. Now that goes into a box culvert, and that box culvert daylights down by Empire and Colton. So when we're talking about a combined sewer overflow, we're talking about something that dumps out into a storm sewer or a creek somewhere and flows out downstream. So just wanted to give you that image of what that looks like. And not all combined sewer overflows are constructed just like this, but they work the same in principle, where whenever they exceed a certain depth, it overflows into a storm sewer that goes straight to a creek type of thing. Next slide, please. So the locust CSO is what we're kind of looking at here. This is a picture from that original plan. And the original study, was not the engineered drawing. So there's some changes that were made to this, but just gives you just that general overview where the dark green line, or on the screen, it's light green, but that green line is a box culvert. By the athletic fields, it's a 5x7. When it gets further to the north, it's a little bit bigger. And the brown line is that 66-inch combined sewer. Now, when the project is done and the sewers are all separated, that 66 will turn into a storm sewer, and it will just go parallel with those boxes and just flow stormwater. The line that was added is that red dash line. It didn't get added in that exact configuration. We ended up having to go and work with BHS to weave it through the athletic field and stuff, but that ended up being a 30-inch sanitary sewer that was added in phase 1 to receive the separated flows as we work our way from downstream. This is downstream to upstream, which is headed back towards Oakland Avenue along Mercer. So when everything's done, we'll have the 66 that's combo right now as storm only, and then the new sanitary sewer is just going to carry sanitary flows. So hopefully this kind of gives you a better idea of what a combined sewer overflow is and what it looks like as we move forward to separate that. And then the locust CSO is right here in the center of your picture. The Colton CSO is up by Colton. These will be eliminated once we get these separations done. The remaining CSO that's left then is Maysfield, which we won't really get into tonight, but I just wanted to mention that to you. Next slide, please. This is a map of the Locust Colton CSO area, the different blocks that are to be done. The dashed red lines are the area of phase 1, 6, and 7 that have already been done. The area by Washington and Mercer that's kind of orange, that is an area that's being worked on right now. As many of you know, Washington was just opened up to traffic again last week. Work is going to proceed on Grove Street now, but that phase 2 is under construction, and the vast majority of construction to be completed before winter, and then punch list items in the spring. Phase 3 is the yellow, and that's been designed already. And we're pleased to say to you tonight that the loan we applied for, or loans, I should say, with the EPA have received, have been published in their book as far as being intended to be funded for next construction season. So we're able to move that one forward with bidding during this winter and construction starting in the spring. So we're thankful that we did get approved for the funding for the water and the sewer loans for that one. The other phases, phase 4, 5, 8, and 9, we'll be talking about shortly, but the 4, 5, and 8 are south of the phase 2 and 3. Phase 9 is up back near Elmwood and Colton, that area up there. And so that this kind of gives you that overview of what the project entails. Next slide, please. This is a bar chart that shows how much pipe was installed with each of the different, or was and will be installed with each of the different phases. So phases 1, 6, and 7, you can see we had over 2 miles of sanitary sewer, 2 miles of water main, and about a quarter mile of storm sewer installed with that project. That project was a very large project. We got 25% principal forgiveness from the EPA, so we made that a bigger project than the others by combining those phases together. The challenge in doing that was that it took more than a construction season to complete that project. Some of you might remember issues we had through the winter with a certain street out there that the construction wasn't finished on, and it was maintained as gravel through the winter. And that really resulted in a lot of angst for the neighborhood. So these larger projects that take multi-years to deliver are a little bit trickier to deliver successfully without the complaints. Phase 2, you can see, we're just over half a mile of most of the pipes. Phase 3 is even less. The point of showing these graphs is what is achievable as far as potentially combining phases, which we'll get to. And you'll look at phase 4, which is in design now, and phase 5, and they're adjacent to each other. And realistically, that is something that could potentially be combined and delivered in one construction season, we think. Phase 8 and 9 are not adjacent to each other. So, but we'll get to that on another slide here as we move forward. So next slide, please. Funding wise, this is where we're at today. Phase 2 is $4.67 million awarded. Phase 3 coming up, construction estimate at $4.2 million. Phases 4 and 5, you can see 2.4 and 4.5. You combine those together, potentially 6.9 million. Phase 8, 5.5, and phase 9, 4.4. So total project cost to finish out everything that we're working on through the future, just under 26 million. So this kind of gives you an idea of what's left in the, not only the number of miles of pipe, but the cost to go with that. Next slide, please. As far as completing a single phase, the bar up on top is a schedule showing if we use EPA loan funding. And the pre-design at 3 months, that pre-design includes things such as selecting the consultant, getting that design contract approved, and some things that go with that. A year, 12 months basically for design. That includes surveying the area, getting information, detailed information about the sewers and the water mains and so forth, and putting the plans together. And then we have, the plans get reviewed and approved by EPA. Then we get into the loan process where we have to have approved plans in order to move into that, which can take 6 months to get through the loan process, and then bidding another 6 months. Showing construction at one season, basically 11 months to get the majority of it done. Sometimes there's some closeout stuff after that, but the majority of construction in one season. And then the closeout with 5 months for finishing out that section of with the CSO. Now, what does that look like if we look to other sources of funding? Potentially, we can compress that time frame and save 9 months if we don't have to go through the EPA loan approval process and the state bidding requirements. So this kind of gives you that overview of the difference in the timelines for those two processes. Next slide, please. So what if our current schedule's up on the top, showing completion by 2030, but what if we were able to accelerate and a more aggressive schedule for delivering these projects? Phase 3 is already in the pipeline. As you know, I said we are in, they've said that we are intended to get loan funding for that for next construction season, so that's wonderful. Phase 4, the design just started this year. It just got under contract. At this point, it would still be possible, if you were interested, that we would do perhaps a contract amendment to the design contract and add in the design for phase 5 with phase 4 right now. And then that could accelerate the delivery so that we can complete phases 4 and 5, where we would have just completed phase 4 before. And then if we get more aggressive with our schedules for phase 8 and 9, you can see we can potentially deliver the completed project, several years ahead of the planned schedule right now. So just wanted to lay this all out on the table that you could see what some options are. And, obviously there's some implications too with disruption in neighborhoods and constructability timeframes for the contractor, get the work done and all that stuff. But we think this is doable. So, next slide is questions and discussion. So turn it back to you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you so much, Kevin. This definitely clarifies a lot of things for us and the rest of the council. Do I see any questions here? Okay, Councilmember Matthew.
I'll get it started because it's going to be a long time. So, Kevin, thank you. I appreciate this. I sent the mayor and Tim earlier. One of the things that I would have liked to see in this presentation, maybe we can talk about a little bit more next week, is also a topographical map of Bloomington. I think most of us are aware that we sit on a moraine or a ridge that puts us at a higher elevation than most of central Illinois. However, that also means that there are high spots and low spots stretching across the town. And everybody who has been sitting in this room who has been saying we're having problems are on the low spots around the hills. So I think that contributes to part of this. We still have to fix it. I'm not making excuses, but all the way around the hill, downtown sits on one of the hills, WJBC's tower sits on one of the hills, and the east side of Bloomington sits on a hill too. So everything is going downhill towards the Eastgate community, the Oakland Avenue corridor where Home Sweet Home is, the west side of Bloomington and all the issues they've had, South Hill neighborhood, all of those are the low ground all the way around us. So I would be fully on board with the idea of combining phases 4 and 5 together. Ultimately, this only solves issues with the east side of the hill. And I know we're going to talk about that more, but we've also got to talk about the south side of the hill, and we got to talk about the west side of the hill as well at some point. So I just wanted to say that for people who might be watching from home, that $25 million is a heck of a lot of money, and it's actually only a tip of the iceberg compared to what we're going to have to spend to solve the rest of the edges around that hill to keep things going. That being said, one of the questions that I've gotten some snarky comments, which is fine, I get it, that said, of course you're starting at Country Club Place and you fixed the problems for the rich people first and left everybody else hanging. And I think you said it very well, that we have to start from the downstream and work upstream from there. If you start fixing things at the upstream point, it doesn't help because there's nowhere for the water to go. You have to start from the creek, from the outlets, which is Sugar Creek in this case, and you have to work your way away from that and fix every piece as you go forward. And as you do that, that alleviates more problems because ultimately all the sewage has to get to the west side of Bloomington. So as we get stormwater out of that system, starting from east going west, we are moving stormwater out of that system that will never be in the pipes as they go from an Eastgate community area around through Oakland Avenue, down past South Hill neighborhood, and it's a domino effect right now. And as we eliminate each piece of the problem, as we're moving around the hill, it will slowly get better over time. So I just wanted to bring that up, that some of this is straight up topography that you may not realize that there's an altitude or a topography change above sea level of 75 to 100 feet from one side of Bloomington to the other, and all that goes downhill, right? I think it was referred to as the P word earlier. So the one question I had, and I wish if you would talk about it a little bit, is for each individual property, what has to happen as we move past a property from one house to the next house? Because I don't know that everybody appreciates how complicated what has to happen and why this takes so long as we're going from property to property and extending this out. Could you hit on that a little bit, please?
As part of the design process, collecting the field data, some of you may know that, from the original study, that's just done with our basic data from our mapping, our GIS type of thing. But when you actually get into the details of collecting the design data, you sometimes find out that one sewer doesn't go the way it was thought as far as how it ties in with the system. So as they work through the design data, they address all the issues, whether it's sewers in the backyard or water mains in the backyard. I don't have all those answers in front of me because they haven't been worked out in design yet. But as the project is designed and then bid and progresses, each property that say there's the, and what we're doing, just the overall principle here is that combined sewers were designed to take both sanitary flow and storm flow. So in a modern system where we're separated, typically the sanitary is an 8-inch. Now, sometimes it gets bigger than that when more than, a few blocks come together, but the basic size is an 8-inch. In a lot of the combined sewer areas, they're 12, 15, 18-inch sewers. They're much bigger because they're not just taking the sanitary flow, they're taking the storm flow as well. So the reason I bring that up is as the engineers, the consultants work on these designs, what they're doing is they're saying, hey, we've already got a pipe here that is big enough to be a storm sewer. So let's turn it into a storm sewer and put in a new sanitary sewer because that only needs to be an 8-inch pipe. And so if that's the design for that block, a new sanitary sewer is installed and all the services that went to that combined sewer now are switched over to the sanitary sewer. And that combined sewer now gets turned into a storm sewer. So what we're doing is we're trying to leverage the assets that are already in the ground, and if they're in good shape, they might not need anything. Worst cases, we need to line it. But, with a liner and a pipe, we can get many decades of service out of that. So we're trying to leverage the assets that are there to make the most cost-effective decisions for the community. So that's kind of the quick overview.
So that means that every house, you have to change every connection at every house while dodging water lines and whatever fiber lines and telephone lines and
Yes.
anything else that might be buried in the ground over the last 70 years. That's a big part of the time delay is to figure out where everything was. Because I've talked to some of the folks that live on Washington, and I think some of them had some unrealistic expectations of how long this was going to take, given the complexity of what we're actually doing.
It is complex and it involves, I was just mentioning what the storm and sanitary aspect is. A lot of blocks, we're also doing water main projects while we're there. When we get into a neighborhood and rip it up, why not get everything in better shape so that we don't have to come back for 20, 30, 40 years or whatever.
Oh, I'm a big fan of that. So
Yeah.
I will never question that part of it. The other thing I wanted to address real quick too is there's been a lot of questions about funding, about how did we get to this point here too. And right after I got elected to council, I think it was actually early 2018. Public Works came to us and said, we need to talk about doing a sewer rate study because there's no money for capital projects in sewers anymore, right? Because at the time we had a sewer rate that stayed fixed. And what had happened over the years is the sewer rate would get raised. Then over a few years, as the cost of living went up and the cost of operating the city went up, the operational portion of the sewer fund consumed the entire rate. So there was no money left to do capital projects again. And so we'd get to a point where then we had no money for capital projects. Nothing was getting fixed on the capital side. And then it would get bad enough that a council would raise the sewer rate again, and we would start the same process over and over again. So in 2018, one of the things that I insisted on is that we put a cost of living inflation rate on there. And I actually raised it above the cost of living to make sure that we had enough money in the capital fund for sewers, just because I knew all these problems were coming. So that was done purposefully and intentionally to start putting money into the sewer capital fund. So knowing that millions and millions of dollars were going to have to be spent. And I just wanted to address that real quick because I know there's been a lot of funding questions, and that was something we did purposefully and intentionally to put more money into that capital fund because we knew we were going to have to start fixing all this stuff sooner than later. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Monty, sorry, Councilmember Ward.
Yeah, I've been hearing that people are having a hard time hearing me, and since I have never been accused of being soft-spoken about anything, I think it might be the microphone, so I'm using this other one. A couple of questions. Does the IEPA provide loans for anything other than CSOs? I mean, would they be a source of funding for the combined sewers that are not CSOs?
The EPA has money available for different community projects. Obviously, certain ones that are, coming up in a compliance issue like the combined sewer, to eliminate that would probably get priority over others. But potentially, yeah, there's funding for other sewer separation projects and that type of thing. But priority wise and how I can't speak to that right now, but there is a lot of communities that seek these funds.
Okay. And where is the Maysfield CSO?
The Maysfield CSO, we'll get into some other things next week, but the Maysfield CSO, if you know where Maysfield is, between Croxton and Oakland.
Okay.
There's like three different locations along Florence, Kreitzer, and McGregor where that is, but
Gotcha.
we'll have a more in-depth slideshow of other things in the community next week.
And what percentage, just ballpark, of the CSs do CSOs represent?
Of our combined sewers, what percentage?
Are CSOs?
Yeah,
Just ballpark.
I couldn't even get, it's pretty small right now. We did have more combined sewers with combined sewer overflows 30 years ago, but they have been over time worked on to eliminate them in different ways. And the biggest one that was left is really the Locust Colton one there, where there's actually two. Maysfield doesn't go, the EPA, what they do is they require us to self-monitor. So we have to, every time there's a storm, we're checking, and now we can do it with more modern electronic equipment. But back in the day, we actually had to have people go out there and look, physically look. They want to know, when did it CSO, for how long, and how many gallons estimated went over that CSO. And the EPA rule is that if it's less than 4 a year, they will allow you to continue to operate the CSO. But if it's more than 4 a year, they want you to get rid of it. And so we were being pushed to do something about the Locust Colton, which is why that was the next project. Maysfield, we just, in the last year, have more modern electronic monitoring equipment in there. Obviously, with that big of a storm, Maysfield did CSO that weekend, but we're doing some long-term monitoring. We've done some basic fixes out there to remove some inlets, move the inlets to the storm sewer off the combined sewer and some stuff like that. But those are just being done, kind of as ad hoc projects right now to see what we can do to maybe mitigate that CSO without having to go to as much effort as the Locust Colton one is. But
Okay.
I just wanted to be upfront with everybody that those are the two CSOs that are remaining, Locust Colton and then Maysfield.
So just two more questions. One, can you just clarify, is there or isn't there a plan? Because I'm hearing, I've heard mixed things, but is there or isn't there a plan to begin addressing CSs that are not CSOs?
Yeah, the remainder of the combined sewer issues, we're going to talk about that more next week with some things, but the the sewer and stormwater master plan from 2014 talks about a lot of different items, and we'll get into that a little bit more next week. There is no set schedule for separating the remaining combined sewers, or even necessarily how to address them, because as we'll see next week, just, eliminating combined sewers by separating them doesn't necessarily fix all the flooding problems. So if I could defer, we'll get into that more next week. I don't want to, spend too much time on that tonight if we can.
Thank you. And then just one request for next
Yeah.
week. I found it very helpful, again, to see the map where all the combined sewers are. And as Alderman Matthey requested for a topographical, like overlay to that, I would also really love to have a third overlay, and that is one where the claims that were called in to PMA came from, and have that all in front of us, please.
And that's all part of that. We're trying to be a step ahead of you, but I appreciate those comments, the feedback to me, because we'll make sure to have those slides. But that is the plan, not only the PMA claims, but the McLean County EMA did that flood damage survey. So we have those points plotted as well, because the PMA claims, a lot of those were related to combined sewer backups and basements. There were a few outside of that area, but the EMA data is a much broader area too. And so we'll share all that with you next
And
week.
if we could get some numbers, dollar figures as to what those things represent in terms of the, both the damage to people's homes and property, and some dollar figures as to what it would cost to correct the combined sewers throughout the city, not just the overflow ones.
Okay.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Motley, and then Councilmember Amy.
Thank you. Hey, Kevin, thanks for all of this. Looking at your diagrams on completing a single phase, is that just for illustration, or does that reflect the actual time it took you for the phase that you're just in the middle of right now?
Yeah, and that's a little bit of a generalization, but it's pretty reflective of the phase we're in right now. So while it's somewhat generic in assignment, it's reflective of a typical construction phase for whether it's 2 that we're in right now or 3 coming up.
So the hands-on work where it says construction, I mean,
Right.
that's when we're actually fixing the problem.
That's correct.
And then all of the rest of that time, before and after, relate to just administration around that work.
Right, administration or engineering or, all that stuff, because there's a lot that goes into, collecting the survey data, preparing the plans, doing all the administrative paperwork before and after and so forth. So, yeah, it's a lot more than just the 11 months of construction. That's the part that people see because it's disrupting their lives as, the contractors working on the street and so forth. But there's a lot more to the overall process, yes.
So just looking at those ratios, I mean, you've got basically, even in the local funding state, got twice as much time, 23 months on the design planning and then the afterwork, as opposed to that hands-on time of 11 months. And then, of course, it's just exaggerating even more when you're using the IEPA funding. The reason I'm asking that is what has to happen in terms of process improvements to compress all of that administrative work, pre-design, search for consulting, et cetera. And I'll put a part B on that. As we talk about, you've mentioned the ability to accelerate 4 and 5. They're adjacent, they could be designed and delivered together. And with all of these other phases, they're adding up to, not really almost what you did in that first phase when you combine those 3. So by accelerating all of that and putting them all together, we're just taking out really the funding to save that 9 months primarily. However, if you were to try and compress the lead time on all of this, would you gain economies in each one of those phases that you have down here, which would allow your true delivery date to be accelerated more than what you have laid out?
There's a lot of different aspects to that from the standpoint, the engineering firms we hire and their staffs and what they can deliver for any given design within a certain amount of time. There's the administrative portions within this because, like, for instance, when we negotiate with an engineering firm, the scope and fee, and then bring it back to the council, just the council approval process for us takes a month. Because when you look at when we actually have to turn our memos in to get on the agenda, every time we go to the council for approval is basically a month period, whether it's to hire the consultant, whether it's to get approval to award the loan, whether it's approval to award the contract. Those are just all part of that process. So, when you start adding that up, that's where this all comes into play. So it's not as simple as just saying, let's just say that the engineer has to get it done in a month less time, or the survey takes a month less. We're trying to share stuff that's fairly realistic. Could we compress it some more? Possibly. But the more you try to compress it, usually then your costs are going up as well. Because just like if we say to a contractor, get this project built in 6 months, not 11, they'll say, okay, here's your unit prices, which are 50% higher than it would have been if we didn't ask for that. So those are all factors that go into how that timeline works out.
What I'm really looking at is all of the other work around that 11 months. So the 11 months is, let's just assume that's fixed. If we all are in alignment in terms of investing in correcting this issue, would it be possible for us to look at alternative means other than waiting for the batch and queue of a meeting sequence, adding months of approvals and things like that? I guess I'm just challenging the innovation, the opportunity to be innovative with respect to how we work around the 23 months that is not the hands-on work, to see what can we do to reduce that lead time, to get this work done faster, easier, presumably, the more we consolidate the administrative work associated with decision-making.
A lot of what we have to, take back to you in that process is just fixed. It's not something I can necessarily change, but certainly we can, talk about it as staff to how that would get done quicker. And the engineering, like I say, if we accelerate it for our consultant, we're potentially paying more as well, because there's only so many people that are working on this project. So for instance, when we design phase 3, there's typically an engineer on the water side and another engineer on the sewer and storm side that's working out the plans, but they're waiting on information from the survey crew that has to collect stuff in the field. And then they're also having other contractors come in, televise all the sewers, get information about those assets, and then pulling all that together. So, and then in the end of that is also the plan submittal to the EPA for their approval for construction permits and also to move forward with the loan. So there might be a little bit to trim there, but the other side of that is that, the 11 months for construction, we're wanting to hit that construction window, that get the thing under contract so that by March, when the weather breaks, they can start digging, or even sometimes February, depending on how mild the winter is, and then wrap everything up, before Christmas type of thing, ideally even sooner than that. So the 11-month period, we're always wanting to hit that window, because if we hit construction start in September, that just makes a mess, because having roads tore up through the winter season is not a good thing, as we saw with phase 1.
So you're showing the potential anyway to begin the phase 4 and phase 5 as early as the third quarter, based on the possible schedule with local funding?
Yeah. So with phase 5 combined into phase 4 with the contract amendment for the engineer, We've already reached out to the engineer. They think that's very feasible to do that. So we see that as an easy win if that is the direction that you want staff to head. You know, we should be able to bring that back to you for council approval very quickly. And then, you know, by delivering phase 4 and 5 together, right there alone, we save that time frame that we would have waited to get phase 5 going.
And if I understood the conversation earlier with Councilmember Matthey's experience and visiting with you, the improvements in this area will have a collateral benefit to the other areas as this matter flows. Is that correct?
So everything that's combined sewer as it comes together across the city, because Alderman Matthey is correct, the east side there is flowing slightly northwest and then heads west along Sugar Creek to the treatment plant on West Oakland Avenue. You'll see when I show you some exhibits next week, the collection system, how, because that's what we call it, is the sewer collection system, how it gets bigger, kind of like, you know, you see with rivers, you see the Mississippi's huge, but as it branches out into the different watersheds, it gets smaller. The sewers kind of do the same thing. So anything that you separate upstream affects downstream. And so by taking out this area and separating the sewer from the stormwater now just goes to Sugar Creek directly and doesn't flow through the pipes to the plant on the west side any longer. So the more that happens, then the more benefit there is to the downstream properties as well, because now they're not getting that storm flow in a combined sewer that's overflowing on them downstream, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yes. And in looking at the Locust Colton phases, and the phases 8 and 9 that are kind of on the, you know, perimeters
yeah.
there, was the damage in those areas as significant as what the damage was in the areas that we've been talking about here with the Eastgate neighborhood?
You know, so 8 is flowing through that whole system, and as was mentioned, we're working from, and generally from downstream to upstream, and we have to have the pipes to connect the separated sewers into as we work our way up. So 8 is really important because it affects everything that is being separated all the way up to it, and allows us to actually finally close off down there at Locust Street and separate the sanitary and the combo sewer, which becomes a storm sewer now. Phase 9 is a little bit different. Phase 9 ties into Colton and a sewer along Colton, and also some stormwater through there. So phase 9 has an effect on the whole watershed or sewer shed there, but it's not in the same way that it's tied together with all the other phases 1 through 8 are all connected in a big long string, if you will. Phase 9 is kind of off to the side, and that's why it can be kind of done last. But they're all important to be able to reduce, you know, the amount of combined sewer in that area so that more is separated, and then we're just left with separated sanitary flow that then is not impacted by these big storms.
But it looks like from the perspective of the constituents who have been experiencing these significant challenges over these last few weeks, that is compartmentalized in 3, 4, and 5 primarily in terms of the basements flooding with raw sewage.
Right. But everybody is still able to be impacted until that separation is complete. So if you don't do 8, you could still affect people potentially in 4 and 5.
Sure, sure. And I'm not advocating
Yeah.
that we cut any of this. I
Right.
think, you know, there's an opportunity before us. And it sounds like, Kevin, based on the fact that you've already got folks working right now doing this type of work, that the sooner we could make a decision regarding funding 4 and 5 as an example, that might reduce your overall cost and reduce the lead time to correct that phase. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, I mean, there's economies of scale, as was mentioned before, whether, it's doing the design work or the approvals, or, even the contractor, there's potentially economies of scale. And then there's a scale where it gets too big, where all of a sudden now we can't deliver the project in a timely fashion or that type of thing. So there's some happy medium. That's why I wanted to share with you, when we combined 1, 6, and 7 together, how massive a project that was, and how it actually took 2 construction seasons to deliver, and some of the negative impacts for, the people that live in those streets and so forth. But just wanted to give idea of the scales and stuff of the different projects. And we think that 4 and 5 together is doable and workable for, delivering in that time frame.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you. Councilmember Emig. And
Thank
it
you.
looks like we have only about a minute left for this. So is there a motion to extend time?
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay. Second by Councilmember Ward. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll? How much time?
15 minutes.
15, okay.
Councilmember Matthey,
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin,
Yes.
Councilmember Motney,
Yes.
Councilmember Emig,
Yes.
Councilmember Becker,
Yes.
Councilmember Ward,
Aye.
Councilmember Craybill,
Yes.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The item passes. So
Thank you.
Councilmember Emig.
Thank you for this presentation. And your responses earlier helped me understand some of this a little bit better, but I'm going to ask just for clarity, so
Sure.
to make sure, absolutely sure I understand. So the Locust Colton Combined Sewer Project, and considering all of these phases, are you telling us that there are ways to accelerate it? Good. And second, that if we're able to complete this, the network of combined sewers that we have in much of our older neighborhoods, the sewage will no longer be kind of mixed in with the stormwater. In other words, do you see this? I know it's a necessary first step, but do you see this as the solution, or do we have more work to do?
And really, that's going to be something I'm going to cover more in depth next week. Just a short answer to that is that, we had so much rain that we, in some areas, had basement backups from the combined sewer, but in other areas, we had surface flooding too. So in other words, some people got a double whammy, if you will. They got it up through their basement, but they also got it in through the basement windows, for instance.
And through the basement windows, I'm assuming that was stormwater.
You're right.
And up through the basements is where you've got the sewage.
Right. And so what I'm saying, I guess, is that all the answers aren't as simple as just separating the sewers. There's other aspects to solving the flooding. And that's where it's taken a little bit longer to look at the different situations in the different neighborhoods around Bloomington, understand, is this just sewage that came up through a floor drain or a toilet in the basement? Or is it also flooding that came from the surface, and so if it's surface flooding in addition to it, now just separating the sewer doesn't fix it, because you're still not taking care of this great amount of runoff that occurred. And so there's going to be other aspects that we'll talk about next week, and approaches of how we might consider that. But let me just leave you with that. For not every neighborhood is it as simple as just separating the sewers.
Oh, yeah, and I understand that, and flooding is bad in general, but the sewage is really the public health crisis, right? So that
Yeah.
we want to prevent all flooding, but
Right, yeah,
especially flooding with the word P in it, right? That's so the master plan from 2014, is that in essence the plan that we submit to the EPA and the IEPA to demonstrate that we are committed to making progress, right? That we're monitoring and working to redress this problem.
Yeah, the 2014 master plan was more of that overall sewer and stormwater for the whole community. there's other aspects that that plan addresses or talks about. The actual plan for like the Locust Colton area was done before that. And that was the plan that was discussed with the EPA for that particular area. So the other master plan is not necessarily approved by the EPA or anything. It doesn't necessarily line out to separate all the sewers, but talks about general, flooding issues across the community and suggests some ideas that might be used that need to be engineered further or studied further, but gives some suggestions there, but also talks about some other issues like I&I, inflow and infiltration. And I'd like to leave some of that for next week because I don't want to make it go too long tonight, but
Right.
all good questions, all good questions.
Well, my final question is just considering that, and I do understand there are lots of levers to push
Yeah.
for the flooding of all kinds, that there are a lot of green solutions, if you will, right? Like even in the last couple of years in communities that are having similar problems, the green stormwater system, or how to accelerate or ways to remedy the stormwater from even infiltrating the combined system, like whether it's constructing some additional mechanism or a sponge, if you will, the reservoirs or the basins that we've created already, creating wetlands even, like just systemically, there might be other levers to consider that would not only speed up the process, might be more affordable, certainly more environmentally sound, but could just worthy of consideration. As long as we're looking at the big picture, I'd be really interested in more information about that as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Craybill and Councilmember Crumpler. And we have 9 minutes left, so you're gonna have to move fast.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks, Kevin, for the presentation. I really thought this was, really got us somewhere and got us to where, potential possibilities, right, that we may have. A couple of questions that one of the public commenters asked about. I don't know if you saw that map that the gentleman was showing to council by chance, where he was talking about the green dots, which I think possibly mean that, the combined sewer has been fixed with the purple dot, and any idea what he was talking about there?
Well, I think it's a map that he got, from engineering, and, the green is, what we would consider a separate sanitary sewer in the sense that it has no stormwater inlet tied to it. And then the purple is the combined sewer. And so green naturally runs into purple because most of the old parts of Bloomington are combined sewer. So as we go through and separate those neighborhoods, we'll turn that into storm sewer and sanitary sewers that are dedicated and run down to a certain point where eventually the sanitary sewer does go back into a combo sewer at some point until the whole city is potentially separated someday, maybe.
Thank you. And then he also mentioned, like, what does a homeowner have to do? Like, once these are separated, he's got his lines going from the house to the street. What does a homeowner have to do to, I guess, their part, if any, to make sure they have separated lines?
Yeah. Well, as I understand it, part of his question was that some of the Eastgate neighborhood actually has an alleyway, if you will, an easement in the backyards that contains, in some cases, the sewer and the water lines, the public sewer and water lines. So I think part of the question was, well, how do you accomplish building new lines, and if all the lines go to the back and stuff? And honestly, that engineering hasn't been done by the consultant yet on that aspect, so I don't even want to try to answer that at this point. But as new water or new sewer is built, as I mentioned before, like what's being done on phase 2 today, is that as we get those new mains installed in the streets, the people are being hooked up to them, up to the new mains, and that's all as part of the project.
Gotcha. And I know next week, we're going to talk about some, I guess, right? You're saying separation type of work, detention ponds, things
Yep.
like that. And I'm just also wondering, have we looked at maybe in the slide, you talked about all the different cities that are dealing with this. What are other cities doing, right? That could be helpful in us making decisions. And then I'll just kind of finish with, I know that, you showed the cost of about 25 million for the entire project, right? And we've talked about, well, is this something we want to use the federal money for, which will ultimately total around 14 million. And this will take care of probably not very many miles of the 85 miles, right?
Right.
And I know it'll help with what's going on in other parts of the city. But I do think, even though I represent Eastgate residents for sure, that we're not spending all this money just to fix a problem on, in the Eastgate area on the east side, that we're also looking at how we can start solving the problem, in the rest of the city. I know that's what we're talking about next week, but that kind of thought came to me as, what can we do both? Can we half it or whatever it takes? Just, we want to start resolving those other combined sewer issues as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Last but not least, Councilmember Crumpler.
Thank you, Mayor. Kevin, this really helped me tonight, in looking at your presentation, really understand the complex work, that you're involved in, and appreciate it in ways that I hadn't before. I just have one question, and, I've listened the last few weeks to, our neighbors from Eastgate, and tonight our neighbors from the west side. And one of the things that's really stood out for me is, and I've heard this from other council members, is the need to try to accelerate things. That this amount of rainfall has created a crisis that's unprecedented. When I think about my own home, if I had experienced the kinds of damage that I've heard described, I would be horrified. So I want to come back to something that Councilmember Motney brought up, and this completing a single phase. And I understand that, there are seasonal issues and loan issues if we're working with IPA. But in the second sort of bar graph, you have scheduling with local funding. I'm wondering, if there, without sacrificing integrity or, the quality of any project, would there be ways to try to reduce the time for pre-design and design? Because we're talking about 15 months, right? And I understand that, you're working with engineering firms and there are a lot of unknowns. But for example, if we were working with local funding, would there be financial incentives to try to make that process move more quickly, or, to work with someone who could help that process move more quickly? Would that be a possibility?
There's always the possibility that if you want to pay more, you can get something done quicker, right? Because I mean,
Right.
the reality is that whether it's a contractor or consultant, if they're going to pay their people to work overtime, whether it be a longer day or, the weekend on a Saturday, you'll get something quicker. But we just, with those bar graphs, are just showing in generalities the typical amount of time that it takes.
I
for these
understand that,
processes.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. So what I hear you saying then is it's theoretically or potentially would be possible to reduce that with the right amount of, with the proper kinds of incentives or.
potentially additional funding, because,
Yeah,
whether the consultant is paying their staff, to work extra overtime, or whether they have to hire some additional help to, get everything put together quicker, it just costs them more money if they do an accelerated time frame.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. And just one last question before we let you go. I'm sure you're eager to go back to your seat. You've been standing for a long time, and thank you so much. Would there be any benefit to, since we're going to be, we're thinking about doing this much extensive work, to do have some of this work done in-house for a period of time, like the design and hire the people who can do it?
Yeah.
Could that compress the time?
One of the things I really, didn't bring up tonight yet, but, when we talk about construction delivery, right now we use our in-house staff to do all the construction inspection.
Mhm.
If we do accelerate the time frame like we've talked about, when we also include some other projects that are in the pipeline, namely a Hamilton Road, a Fox Creek Road Bridge and Road. As we look at the staff resources we have today, we'll probably even have to hire some consultants to help us with construction inspection. So if we had better staffing, yes, we could do some of this work in-house. The way we are right now, we can just, with the engineers and everybody we have, just manage the consultant resources and, manage these projects to get them delivered. Now, we do smaller projects in-house that don't involve as much complexity. We would love to take some of these on in-house, just don't have the staff resources to do that right now.
Okay. Did you want to add something?
I do, Mayor. Alderwoman Motney's comments about process that were followed up by Alderman Crumpler. And please don't hold me to this, but there might be a way to shave some time off of the process, and I don't know exactly what this looks like. But we just did this recently where more authority was granted to me in right-of-way acquisition. So project specific, different things that typically come before council for approval. That might be something to consider. But Kevin sharing, the cost for efficiency or the cost for expediency in this, there's a price for that. But setting here was thinking maybe some project specific approvals could be something that's granted.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, next item on the agenda is city manager's discussion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I do have a couple of comments. One to share just an update related to the COVID pandemic. The health department will be standing down the mass vaccination model at our arena after the 2 mobile clinics. Also, they're paying very close attention to the call or a need for vaccination and everything related to the numbers that we're currently seeing, that we fully expect to trend upward with the return of students this week at ISU and both Westland. So that's one item, more to come on that. Also wanted to share a press release that was put out today at 5 o'clock, and that is the police chief selection update. The selection team that's helping me with this process, we've reduced down to 2 finalists. And in this very room next week, prior to the committee of the whole, somewhere around 4:30 to 5:30, or even 4 o'clock to 5:45-ish, there's going to be a meet and greet with the 2 finalists. And the 2 finalists are Colonel Jamal Symington with State Police. Currently holds a deputy director position with State Police, 25-year veteran of the Illinois State Police. Prior to going to the state, he was with a county sheriff's department. And Colonel Symington is a Bloomington resident, but works in Springfield. The other candidate is Police Chief Kenny Winslow, and he is a career employee of the city of Springfield, and holds that position, has held that position since 2013. So down the home stretch on this selection, going to do a meet and greet here as promised to the community. Masks will probably be required. We'll have some social distancing, but very much wanted this to be a public setting for this selection. And then also going to create a portal for public input prior to the offer being extended to the selected candidate. But both men are excellent candidates and going to take an already great department, I believe, to the next level. So very excited. Thank you. I forgot my slides. Here we go. Saturdays on the Square, August 14th. North Mississippi All-Stars. This is something that's been well attended. quite the buzz downtown and all the different events. Next slide, please. I think I've got two more. Oh, honey, First Friday, September 3rd is our next one. We just did have our First Friday this past Friday that was well attended, but this one's the next one. And then the final slide. Tour to Chocolate. This was postponed and is going to be September 17th. So while this is a rescheduled event, we're also going to do this in the memory and honor of two of the former Bloomington mayors that have recently passed, and that's Mayor Markowitz and also Mayor Buchanan. So we're combining that with the Tour to Chocolate that will occur September 17th. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And I only have just one thing in terms of mayor's comments. The application process is ongoing for Ward 6 vacancy. For full considerations, applicants were asked to turn in their application by August 13th, which is Friday, after which, the names will be shared with the public. So that's kind of where we are. And I believe applications are in the single digits at the moment. That's it. So council members, comments? Councilmember Bolin?
Yeah, I met with representatives from Ferrero last week. Very gracious. They want to be very involved in the community, which is great. And I believe they're going to do groundbreaking in September. And I was told that the whole southwest side's going to smell like chocolate.
Well, right in time for Tour de Chocolat. Okay, Councilmember Eman.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to shout out to the NAACP Youth Council that was created and celebrated last Saturday. It was an incredible ceremony, and I was really proud to be there.
Awesome. Councilmember Ward.
Yes, I would like to formally request, and I'll put this forward as a council member initiative if I need to, but I'd like to formally request that we look into the possibility of returning to having some virtual public comments. I've asked around informally among some council members, and it seems like there's some support for that. And I really would like to see that happen again. There were a number of people from Ward 7 anyway who weren't able to speak tonight because they're immune compromised and they're not able to come in person, or they have other health concerns. And while we do accept public comments in the form of emails to council members, unfortunately, those aren't read to the public. And so it prevents, I think, us from benefiting from the interchange and the conversation. So I'd like to formally request that. And I want to share with you just a paragraph from Amy Scott, who's a resident of Ward 7, who spoke on who wrote, and I'll share the entire email with the council. She said, "I've lived in this house 61 years and have seen it get worse and worse. It isn't about the rainstorm of the century. It's about antiquated combined sewer systems in the older areas that need upgraded. When my great-great-grandfather, William Sprague, installed many of these sewers, they did a fine job, but it's almost 100 years later, and we need to modernize our sewer systems here in the older parts of the city. This is now causing health risks to so many citizens in our community. It breaks my heart to see how the city has turned its backs on the people, your citizens, the people who need you most, who have trusted you to do the right thing." So I'd like people like Ms. Scott to be able to speak for herself, and I just invite us to take that up.
That's good. Thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay, sounds good. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I will make that motion.
Second? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. See you next Monday.